Hello everybody and welcome back to the Dovetail box series. Got another quick episode for you today because all we're going to be doing is attaching the base of the box. Let's get going. Alright, so for the base of this box I'm going to be using 4mm birch plywood because it looks nice, it's pretty strong and stable, and we can also pre-sand this top and bottom face so that you get a nice smooth finish. You can obviously do the same with MDF and stuff like that, but it doesn't really look as nice. And if you go for a solid wood base, then you've got problems with expansion and contraction of the piece while restricted in a box frame that will not move in the same direction, thus maybe pushing joints apart or splitting the bottom. And also 4mm thick base in solid wood is also going to be quite prone to snapping possibly along the grain. So I've prepared this piece on the bandsaw and cut it about 1mm or so oversized. It's important that you cut it oversized so that when you put it on the box, you've got a little bit of wiggle room that once we screw it down, you can plane the sides flush. You want to avoid making it too much of an overhang because that's going to give you problems when it comes to screwing through and getting in the center of the bottom of the box later. So cutting it 1mm or so oversized is perfect. And like with this box, don't worry too much about splintering or anything because one, we can sand most of it off, and two, it's actually going to be hidden either by the base of the box or the plinth that will be covering this joint. It's also worth noting that this plywood bottom is just going to be screwed to the bottom of the box. We're not doing anything fancy in this project, such as a grooved bottom that you may have seen on other boxes. We're going to save that for some of the later projects in the online school. So for this one, keeping it simple, screw to the bottom and then a plinth overlay to hide everything. So to begin with, flip the box over and I'm just going to pop the base on there and double check how much of an overhang I've got. It feels like it's about 1mm or so. Yeah, so I've double checked and we've definitely got roughly 1mm overhang on all the edges. So what we're going to do is get a marking gauge, and we're not going to set that to half the thickness of this material. What we're actually going to do is set the thickness of the marking gauge to half the thickness plus 1mm. And that will account for the 1mm overhang on the plywood base so that when we scribe the marking gauge around this and screw through it into the base of the box, those screws should be dead in the center of the bottom of the box and less likely to blast through either the outside or the inside faces. So I'm using a ruler to help add that 1mm offset, lock the marking gauge to that setting, and then I'll just very lightly scratch that setting around this plywood. In any other instance, it would be better if you did this with a pencil gauge so that you can get rid of the lines after you've screwed through, but on this, the plinth around the base will hide these lines anyway, so it's not a massive issue if we've got them left over. So now I'm just going to put a mark on just a random corner. Let's do a little star or something like that, and then a star on a corresponding corner of the base so that when I put this on each time, I know that those two marks need to go together and I don't accidentally put it around this way or this way. It helps keep track of everything. And now we need to start drilling the pilot and the clearance holes in order to attach the base. Now, if you're not entirely sure on the difference between pilot and clearance and maybe even countersinks, then have a look at my video on how to screw wood together. Very quick video, link is in the top corner and also linked below. I will be sanding this plywood before the final fit, but what I prefer to do is screw through it first and do all the drilling and everything, which will inevitably cause some breakout on the inside face. But then if I'm sanding afterwards, then it will sand it all flat and get rid of it all anyway. Whereas if you sand first and then screw through, you're going to be left with breakout and you've got to remove it all again. So screw first and then sand later. So I've clamped the box down with the plywood on top and I've double checked that the overhang on all the sides is exactly the same, and also double checked that the corners that I marked are also sitting on top of each other. So I'm happy this is in the right position. We'll start off with the pilot. We're just going to do one corner, get that one fixed with a screw, and then once that's done, take off this clamp, fix the opposite corner down, and then by that point the base won't be able to move and we can do the rest of them in one hit. So there we go, we've got one corner attached. It's obviously able to pivot at this point, which is why we'll get the opposite corner done first. Same again, get it into position and clamp it down. Probably get away with just one this time. Okay, so the two opposite corners are attached, meaning the base obviously can't move. Now, as I said, we're going to do the piloting and the clearance and the countersink for all the rest of them, but there's no point screwing them all in at this point because you're just going to have to take it off and then sand it. Just get the holes piloted, clearanced, countersunk, and then that's it. Take these two out, do the sanding, and then attach the base afterwards. All right, so all the holes have been drilled, and what I'm going to do before we sand it is just transfer that corner mark that we put on to align the two corners. I'm going to move that to the side of the plywood so that when I sand the faces, I don't remove that marking and then I can't remember where it goes. So transferring it to the side means that once it's sanded, I've still got a mark there to line up, and then even though we're planing it later, it will already be attached by that point. In terms of grits for sandpaper, I would definitely start with 120 grit on plywood to get rid of those machining and split marks on it. And then once you've gone through that, take it up to maybe 180, possibly 240. Working with a random orbit sander, you could probably get away with stopping at 180 and that'll be perfectly fine. If you're doing it by hand, 240 might be better, but completely up to you. I think this will be okay. And now to plane it flat. So nice and simple with this. When planing this plywood down to match the side of the box, only work from the outside to the middle. Don't go all the way through because you risk catching end grain on the opposite side and then breaking out that beautiful hard work you've put in up until this point. So just work to halfway, go for a nice fine cut because you want to avoid taking off material from these sides that you've already flushed. There we go, so I'm just catching a bit of wood there. And there you go, as simple as that. That is how you attach the bottom of the box. So if you haven't already, please have a look at my video on how to screw wood together. I know it seems like a seemingly boring and simple topic, but trust me, learning the difference between piloting, clearance, and countersinking is extremely important. So you're now ready to move on to the next lesson, which you can do so by clicking the link below. And if you haven't already, please press the subscribe button to the left-hand side of the video. See you in the next one.